All right, like a little sound check in, all the fun stuff. Good stuff, Taylor. Really like your scorecard there. That's a great way to look at different stocks in the markets and things like that too. And well, God, it feels like I don't know what today feels like. Feels like it's been a long week, a fun week, long week, all the different things. We've got our youngest, it's his final week of school. And so seriously looking forward to summer break. More for the I mean, I know he is too, but now his parents are also looking forward to summer break. All right. It feels like 2 Fridays. So, stock market here, look, it's stock market. I'm gonna give it props. I mean, yesterday that kind of, this little Japanese yen, and this was fueled more by that, not Japanese yen, the Japanese bond auction. That's just there's a disaster unfolding there in terms of debt to GDP, like at 300% and all that kind of stuff. So this was the big that was kind of the I mean, it caught me off guard. So I saw this. We're consolidating, and I thought we'd either consolidate or grind higher. That's what I was looking for. We came down, we tested the lows. I was, of course, this is about the time I work out. You kind of glance into the screen, you're like, what's happening? All the things. And anyway, should have remembered that it was VIX expiration. I'm saying that to myself. Weird stuff happens on that day. And even though VIX expiration is right at the open, you do get these weird moves. And I just always remember like those out of the blue 80-point down days. It was always VIX expiration. We're so used to it with the trade wars and stuff like that that it was like, okay. So now we're just kind of, got a little rounded bottom here. Um, all the stuff like that. And we're kind of setting up to see what what happens next, for lack of a better term. What happens next here? What can we look at? And where do we go from here? So a couple things I want to look at, and after the close I'm going to talk about some cycle highs and lows. I wanted to update those, and we are right smack in the dab middle for some key cycle highs in stocks and Bitcoin coming up for next week. So just FYI, um, shouldn't really impact today or tomorrow, famous last words, but we'll take a look at that. The other thing on the S&Ps here, this is the put call ratio just on this particular security. Same thing here, when this is kind of like when it gets really high, that's a good time to buy. It gets really high, everybody's freaking out buying puts. When it gets really low, it gets a little, got to be a little bit more careful. And I found though with the S&Ps that you really just want to look at these spikes, these upside spikes. The downside ones, they can get low. What happens when it gets low like this? You just kind of start going sideways. You don't necessarily correct, but just kind of noticing that, I would say the upside here, could be a little limited. CRWV. This has been a fun one. Certainly, it deserves a break here. We got nice action on this today. We got out of our diagonal, which severely limited the gains on the second half of that trade. I like the idea of tomorrow, but remember, it's come a long way, baby. You got a lot of people holding calls here, and now what we want to see is want to kind of give this a chance to kind of catch its breath. So I'm not really intrigued by anything at the moment on this. I certainly would love to buy some pullbacks, but at the moment, flat on it. Yeah, so for Bitcoin, also some cycle highs coming up in Bitcoin. So definitely do not chase Bitcoin here if you're in some Bitcoin related thing. Speaking of coin, you want to take profits here. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let me find so what do we got on this? I mean, nice move today. We got the move up $16. Um, the debit spread has moved a little bit, not as much as I'd like. 270. I'm going to go ahead and book it though. Like I said, we've got cycle highs coming up for Bitcoin and stocks next week. And so I kind of like the idea of erring on the side of booking some gains here. And I'm going to go ahead and do that with Coinbase as well. If you've got our original call debit spread, or if you rolled it, I think that, this is the kind of time when you want to be taking profits. So let's see if we can get this. VIX new lows on the day. I need to look at a butterfly. S&Ps look like they could just grind higher all day. Copy. Okay. All right, so there's the exit from coin. And then we were just looking at CRW. So CRWV, and where would be some. So this is where support and resistance come into play. So just imagine that you were long the stock, and you're trapped. This is where algos go hunting for liquidity. So at the very least, they're going to push it through below 100, probably through here, probably to 95, 96. And to me, that would be a good area to get long. So this is just, this is these momentum stocks are nice because they're very, very, very much human emotions. And let me just and human emotions is something that's, lack of a better term. Did that go? I'm just going to leave that there. Okay, so 93.66. So I have this because kind of a buy zone. So let's see if we flush into this for that one. And then IONQ has got this kind of crazy, crazy move today. It's coming off here a little bit. What I noticed on this, did a little bit of trade on it earlier, but what I noticed on this is that the high strike is 47 for tomorrow. And if they don't add more to it, that's when you can kind of get a gamma, those gamma squeezes. Because what happens is if you buy, the $47 call, the market maker, shorts the $47 call and then buys some IONQ to hedge it. Well, if you actually blow through that strike, all of a sudden it forces the hedgers to add more shares because they can't hedge it with options anymore. So there's a little bit of a, this is low, it's low volume, it's kind of methodical. It's not, to me, this does not look like this is done. It could be. It looks like it's like a kind of a normal, like, yeah, all right, we got to catch our breath here. What I'd like to see, of course, is that we then kind of firm up into the close, and then tomorrow, could we get a gap up? The all-time high in this is, I think, $56. And so it's kind of a situation where you kind of get this kind of short squeeze type situation. And the high there is not even a short squeeze, like a hedging squeeze. And the high is oh, it's not showing it on there, but it's like $54 and something. So we may tag that tomorrow. So I think that one's just interesting. Again, that's not your normal setup, right? That's just more pure emotional trades. 54.74. Thank you. Let me add that on here. Oh, it's snapping to something. Gosh, that's like the most annoying thing. Yeah, snap mode. Take that off. Jesus. Pardon I was just asking him for his help on that. All right, so 54.74. All right, so that's the all-time high in IONQ. I think there's a decent shot we test that tomorrow. So let's see how it closes. Obviously, all the fun things there. Tesla. So Tesla really a solid day today. And what I'm looking for is that, we tend to see some strength early on Friday. Could we get some more? We've got a zone here of resistance from about, really these two skylines. And just really just looking to see, can we just kind of get into this? And if we get in this early tomorrow, I would just bail. It's possible it could keep going. It's Tesla, right? But I like how it's acting today. It was even when the market sold off earlier, it was holding up. It was holding up really good, and so I thought that was great. What else we got here? So APP, we got a really fantastic entry on this, and it's just kind of hanging out here. Not, this is fine. We got a great entry. I think we got it, and now we're kind of back to our entry, but as long as this 8 EMA holds, and it's great. It's consolidating on low volume. That's looks like very Brecher ledge there, Brecher ledge-ish there. So that's not great, but it's not horrible. We got a good entry. We've got a little bit of time. AVGO looks great. Love this. We're sitting, we've got a position on, we're consolidating in low volume, just kind of waiting for it to bust a move. It came up and gave the fire line a kiss. And, after that first kiss, that first kiss was too soon. It's going to get a slap in the face and it's got to come back and try again, at least, at least, at least buy your dinner first, right? Before you try for the kiss. And so let's see if it comes back with a better approach there. Coin, we already looked at. Let's look at Meta. Meta looks great here. I mean, Meta, kind of had some weird selling based on, oh, the AI is going to be delayed. Like, who cares? So came down to the fire line. So we've got low volume consolidation at the 8 EMA. So, I like that. We're not seeing a lot of daily squeezes here, but we are seeing, these are where the 30-minute squeezes and things like that are setting up. TEM, we got some good entries on this. We got 3 entries on this. Bought lower. We're getting a bounce off of the 21 EMA. See if we can get something going out of there. TLT, my nemesis, is it finally bottoming today? It is right in the midst of the cycle lows. I will update this after the close on kind of where we are on those cycle lows there. And I've been trying to buy Dash and it's just running away. So I've got a bid in at the 21 EMA. Obviously, we're not anywhere close to that. I'm just going to show this one because my daughter came in the other day and said, I got to buy Roblox. It came down to the fire line. She bought some calls. I don't have it as a, she bought it. She trades Roblox pretty well because, she's a Roblox fiend. And we may, we could look at that one too. I don't know if there's any squeezes or anything on it. For the timing, by the way, this is the stuff I'm going to review after the close. I'll show you a couple of them right now, just so you can kind of at least see what I'm thinking about. There's timing for a cycle high in stocks, basically today through the 27th. So that's kind of the zone. So I think that, going into Memorial Day weekend, it would make sense that we show some strength. And, but then I don't want to have a lot of long exposure going into the weekend. In fact, I'll probably look at adding some bearish positions. The other one here I think is a big deal is Bitcoin. Also cycle highs, coming right into some cycle highs here. So I think for Bitcoin, I'm not necessarily a fan of shorting Bitcoin, but the idea of if you've got any trades on that are kind of moving with Bitcoin, i.e. coin, look to take profits. Now, I don't mean like long-term, blah, blah, blah. This is just, short-term cycles. This is something that could, intermediate term high, all that kind of stuff. Newman was to Seifeld, yeah. You never, John, you never add the TLT position. No wonder you won at poker. Yeah, this would be a great time if you are wanting to catch kind of the bottom of the potential cycle low and catch it up there. Yeah, let me know next time you're gonna wait. I'll follow your lead. All right, so that's all we have, right? Those are all the positions we have. All right. Yeah, so Brad, it's a good question, and the thing to remember about cycles, what I've found in watching them over the years, is that they're call it 70% accuracy in terms of like wow, example, the cycles called for a stock market low in the first week of April, kind of nailed that one, right? And so what I say on something like that is the cycles are like anything in the markets, things that tend to happen a majority of the time, but they don't happen all the time. So what I would do with something like Bitcoin, well, first of all, if you're doing something longer term, don't worry about the shorter term cycles. This is just more the shorter term ebbs and flows. But then the other part of that is a messy chart in terms of you can't see anything. But the other part of that is simply just the idea that you can trail up a stop. So it could certainly keep going, and I think that's important to kind of acknowledge. Okay, so I want to come back and look at a couple of different things here. So let's look at, yeah, QBTS. So QBTS here, this is same thing as IONQ. So what I'm intrigued by with this is that it ripped through its high, okay, and it's just still going. And then if you look at IONQ, when you see something like this, the idea is that it could form a similar pattern where it rips through its high and then has a similar extension. At this point, I'm just kind of looking like, can we just retest its old highs? And I like right now that it's just kind of quiet. We probably could get some day trader selling and stuff like that here too. But you know, versus CRWV, this is something that I think we do need to flush down probably to the mid 90s, which I would love to buy. So that's what we got there. Let me bring this chart up. Yeah, let's look at Peloton. I adjusted the settings here so I could add those cycle times. Yeah, Peloton here. Look, it's an interesting pattern. You got a daily squeeze. A little more difficult for me to get interested in just because it's a small stock, and a big move on it is 65 cents. And I even looked at the options on it and things like that. And so, eh, this is a tricky one. There's a lot of baggage in the stock. What I like with stocks like CRWV, it's in blue sky territory. What I liked about IONQ is that it's got it's approaching all-time highs and it's running out of the options are it's through its top strike in the options market, and sometimes that can create some imbalances. So I think that's interesting. This one, I think there's better plays out there for lack of a let's see here. Yeah, so AVGO, we looked at that. I like AVGO here. We got this one. We have exposure to it. Beautiful consolidation. It's got earnings coming up, kind of a run into earnings type situation, which I like. And then for we also have app and let's delete. And good consolidation here. This thing has been pretty crazy. It's pretty quiet here, trying to build something up. On something like this, my main criteria is that it has to stay above its 21 EMA. And what we're looking on this is shorter term squeezes, the hourly and the 2-hour squeeze that are building up. You do have kind of the daily squeeze is kind of ended. So, not necessarily looking for a huge move, which is why I did it with a call debit spread versus a call. If there's a daily squeeze and there's a potential for a bigger move, I'll tend to look at straight calls. If it's like an hourly or something like that that might be fighting the daily, I like to do that debit spread to kind of offset any premium decay. The best ones are if you get like a daily squeeze that's just firing and like a 30-minute squeeze that's just firing, and those are nice combinations. All right, we looked at Meta. We looked at one thing that's interesting here too is MSTR is just it's not moving with Bitcoin, and I think it's probably catching a lot of people by surprise. I don't understand why it's not. I'm not in it, but it's remember, it's not a pure Bitcoin play. It is kind of it is a weird structure. And the fact that it's kind of selling off here is, if Bitcoin has a cycle high for next week coming up, I think a great way to play that would be doing some type of a bearish play in MSTR. So that might be something I look at. I don't necessarily want to put on something today, but that's one I'll keep an eye on. Yeah, so that makes sense, Jonathan. If the net, was it the NAV to Bitcoin price, it gets too stretched, it's got to contract, and that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and John, that's one thing I've noticed with MSTR. And I don't have the chart in front of me, but so let's say that making up numbers here, but let's say that it owns, um, it owns 100K of Bitcoin. Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's say that it owns, yeah, let's say it owns 100K, 100K of Bitcoin. I'm actually messing up the analogy. Let's say it's worth this. Based on all the Bitcoin, it's worth this. And so if it's trading here, it's trading at par with its holdings. If it's trading up here, it's trading at a spread higher than its holdings. And if it's trading down here, then it's trading at a spread lower than its holdings. So the idea with this is that if it gets too far stretched to the upside in relation to its holding, it's got to come back to center. And if it's same thing here, if it's trading too low based on its holdings, it's got to come back to center. Now that's not reversion to the mean like the 21 EMA. That's just reversion to the mean in terms of the MSTR price in relation to the Bitcoin price. And so we're at a situation right now where the value of MSTR, it's kind of in relation to its Bitcoin holdings is stretched, and that's why it's just not reacting. So it's a little tricky one versus versus if you're doing like IBIT, it doesn't have that. It just moves with Bitcoin. It's just a pure fund that owns Bitcoin. Let's look at my nemesis here, TLT. If this trade doesn't work, then Sam's going to have to give me another one of those, like the SLV memes. We are at a point here where, the cycle lows are kicking in and looking for a rally into, believe it or not, the first week of July. Now, that may only take us back to here, which is fine. That's why I bought some in the money calls, and then we'll see. So I wouldn't be doing this with really any other security. It's just interest. Interest rates are kind of a weird. They have these cyclical moves like that. All right, we looked at Tesla. We looked at Bitcoin. Believe it or not, silver. So silver had it had a spike low here. It was looking for another spike low. It actually held, and that actually sets it up for a pretty decent move. So that's one I'll cover after the close today when we cover cycle work and stuff like that. Silver, believe it or not, looks pretty good to the long side, but I'm not going to buy SLV. Yeah, yeah, no, that would be interesting. Okay, Qs. Well, yeah, let's look at IWM here. Yeah, back at its 21 EMA. Nothing too special. Twilio, yeah, Twilio looks really good. So Twilio, if we're looking at this, we had a long squeeze here that's run out of gas. We do have kind of a 2-hour squeeze here. So the price looks good. What I like to see though is something where I should put the 21 EMA on there, where you've got a squeeze, you're near the 21 EMA, and then that allows kind of like the next launch higher. So from a pure squeeze perspective, this isn't the best time to buy it, but I just want to emphasize that doesn't mean it can't go higher. It just means that when you've got a specific setup where it aligns with all the psychological, you know, impetus that causes the stock to go higher, and you've identified that moment in time, which in this case would be a squeeze and a pullback to the 21 EMA, it's just that your odds of success are higher. Whereas here, yeah, it may go up, but we don't necessarily, it's like, oh, my setup isn't, we're declining after squeeze fires. So, it's probably a long way of saying, I like it, but I gotta wait for like the next move higher kind of a thing. Because remember, we're not trading stocks. I mean, let me correct that. If we're short-term trading, we're not really trading stocks. We're trading psychology. If you bought Nvidia 3 years ago because you believe in the company and you still have it, yes, that's an investment and you're not worried about the short-term psychology. Whereas I see is that are we going to be able to get kind of a run into the close and set us up for P's have actually recovered pretty nicely. So let me look at the trace numbers real quick because I think it may be worth a butterfly. Is it updated? Yeah, I guess it is updated. Okay. So, look, we got these big levels up here at 59.05, 59.25. They could change, but a lot of times that can be kind of a magnet. We're at, 58.73 right now. That would be a stretch, but what I like about it is that it's cheap. So if we look at SPX here, and man, I was a chicken today with the SPX plays. Although actually getting out of the iron flight when we did was good. That call debit spread would have been nice. So if we looked at, say, and you got this little pocket up here, and of course it could end up all the way down here, right? But after yesterday's, 58.80, 58.80, we're at 58.75, 58.80. Well, that's no fun. But we've got this big 5900, 5905 there, which is kind of interesting. So what I wanted to look at here is that the 5900s are 30 cents. It's a long ways away. And it's probably not even worth doing a butterfly. But the 58.75, 58.90, I want something cheaper than that. 58.80, 58.80, 58.95 call debit spread looks pretty reasonably cheap. So 58.80, 58. So 15 points wide. I'm just want to see what the price is here. $3.35. All right, that's not bad. Let me see if I can work this. 360. Oh shit! I'm trying to get in. Madre de Dios, chingao. God, VIX just plunged. See if I can get it. I'm just trying to get it at the current price. Okay, I got it at 360. So let me post this. So this is just to see, could we get a little bit of a run into the close? I haven't trusted the SPX all day. I kind of joked today I got out of the call debit spread early, which means we'll probably rally. This call debit spread expires today. Can we test 58.90-ish? Yeah. So market cycle highs. I mean, look, that's a legit concern for sure. I think so one of the things I look at, and again, we'll have a more in-depth conversation about this after the market closes. But it doesn't necessarily mean you dump all your longs, but you absolutely add some hedges. So a little bit of both. And because the cycles are not, they're not the be all and end all, right? But they're suggestions that seem to work quite a bit. And so I've learned to ignore them at my peril is basically how that's come down. I'm just updating this just to make sure. Charm pocket up here at 5,900. So there's a possibility here that we could get to 5,900, and then our call debit spread would take advantage of that if we can get going. And then it's cheap enough that if it doesn't, it's not like, you know, hold on. It's cheap enough that we're not buying in the money, deep in the money calls. So if we absolutely reverse and die into the close, that's the downside of something like that. And then remember, we've got this big fire line at 59.25. So could we get one more test of that tomorrow? Yeah, I like that oil slick, Jonathan. I think that looks good. Yeah, Stack, great question. So Almanac is showing 3 bullish days next week, conflicts with cycles. How do you read that? So I just look at both, and it could be something like that would say something like, okay, great. So maybe we do get rallies. I think we're closed Monday, right? So maybe we get, rally Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then after that, the cycle highs kick in. And so the cycle high, think of the cycle highs and lows as kind of a date range suggestion. It's not necessarily like, Well, it's the week of 22nd through the 25th. All right, that's the time to look for it, but maybe it happens on the 28th. So that's what I found because the reason I found that they're helpful is that it's an abrupt reversal of the current trend. And so as traders, we're taught to, the trend is your friend. And so, we keep, trade the trend until it ends. The cycles are nice because they kind of give you a heads up like, hey, the trend might end right here. So, that's not the time you want to absolutely load the boat. Anyway, we'll talk more about that after the close because we're going to do a deeper dive into that. All right, SPX. So we'll see if we can get something going there. If we look at the internals here, VIX acts great. We're just kind of walking down, walking down, walking down. That's what we want to see from that perspective. And let's see what else. No, 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 no. What time is it? Okay, 2:30. It's 2:32. Time flies when you're having fun. All right. All right, let's see what else is cooking here. I always kind of like to take a look here at BKNG just because it's BKNG. Nice little 50-point move today. I've been watching this one to see if we do have a 60-minute and 2-hour squeeze. It's a hard one to trade, but you don't need to trade a lot of contracts, right? Like a one lot or something like that. PLTR holding up really well here. Again, no real like daily squeeze or anything like that. Apple kind of continues to weigh on the markets. Just not really get anything going. Compare that to like what's happening with Google and everything like that. It's just I think that the market's kind of waiting. Tick's coming down here a little bit. Amazon here, great, pull back to the 21. We've taken out the previous day's high. I mean, Amazon there actually, looks pretty good. UNH, which has been pretty crazy. We had some short covering and now it's kind of DOA at this point. When you get something like this, you get some potential for some fun short covering, but now it's just kind of, let's see on, oh, yeah, let's look at Meta again here. Yeah, so we're kind of in a spot here, and this is what I was talking about. We have a situation where we've got this is always a little dicier time. So we've got some great lower term signals, but we've got daily signals that are kind of like you got a sell signal here, and the daily signal. You've got structurally a good move here, and you've got this, you got these squeezes setting up. And this is why we're doing, certainly doing a lot more like debit spreads and things like that. And so if we look at this and say, okay, well, let's go look at the 2-hour RAF and what's going on there is that, so now we've got a situation here where the daily chart, it's kind of neutral with, kind of some selling on it. But then if you look at the 2-hour chart, you've got buy signals and, this momentum is turning higher. And so on something like this, it's not looking for like, oh my God, this thing is going to rip. It's just like, okay, can we come back to 656, which is prior resistance? So a little different kind of trading than, oh my gosh, we got some fresh momentum coming up, on the daily chart and things like that. And so that's what we always want to kind of take into account is, what time frame are we trading? And if it's a lower time frame like this, typically it's like, okay, let's use some spreads and we're just going back to prior resistance. instead of like, oh, this thing is going to make, a 1272 extension or something like that. So it's, little, so it's just kind of dialing back expectations a little bit. Okay, let's see what else. Oh, Google. Yeah, Google's just been on a tear here. And I guess this red line here, that's just the monthly quant pivot. So you can see it's kind of holding it in check right here. 70% of the time, actually more than that, like 80% of the time, stocks stay in between their monthly um, L1 and H1. They're just super powerful levels. You can see Google right now just kind of smack dab up against that. And then I saw some questions about SMCI earlier, and it's just, this thing's kind of DOA. I mean, it's, uh, I don't know. There's so much, again, another stock that just has so much baggage in it. Let's see. Indexes here just kind of petering out. Not horrible. I mean, I do like that we're kind of selling off here into the 220, 240 zone. The ticks are that then kind of sets us up for a rally into the close, but you don't want to start rallying from too far down. Yeah, call or put versus a vertical. So a lot of times it depends on, does the stock have pretty high implied volatility? Um, so a lot of it has to do if the implied volatility on it is pretty high or pretty low. Whether it's relative, especially if it's in its 52-week history, that's a big part of it. If it's pretty high compared to its 52-week average, the spreads kind of help offset theta decay. And then if it's kind of low, or if it's lower price and you can go out further, then yeah, I would just buy the call and go in the money. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the S&Ps here. We were all geared up for kind of some movement here, and we're just kind of, from 58.77, we were kind of poised for a little bit of a rip. Now we are selling off into that 240 time frame, so that does open the door typically for a rally into the close. So that part's good. Um, I'd have preferred maybe a pullback to 58.75. So then what we want to see is, okay, from here then I don't need all this put call. So, from here then, as we get into 240, which is in 1 minute, we'd want to see that there's a pretty hefty bid setting up here. And so for that to happen, we'd want to see the tick. Now the moving average of the ticks is in the right spot. We did get a little bit of a flush here. The VIX popped up a little bit, but it's near the lows of the day. But if this thing is gonna, get this kind of nice rally into the close, we need to see ticks back up here at 800. The VIX kind of come back down. So we'll see if we can kind of get that. And let's come back here and kind of check and see if any of the spot gamma levels have changed. Still pretty high at 5,900, although we're getting expansion here at 5,880. So that could be kind of a magnet here too. There we go. Oh yeah, no thanks. Yeah, okay, 0 DTE, a little better there. So yeah, ESO 5885, so a little bit below. So, you kind of have this interesting pocket way up here, but you would need a pretty big MOC order to rip us all the way up there. And, we're kind of just like listlessly hanging out around here. All right, let's get a couple more of these here. Let me move this over here. Yeah, the 5850 IC was interesting. I mean, probably couldn't have got we probably could have gotten a little bit more than 2 points out of it, but all right, so now, man, crowd just keeps on going too. Yeah, this is great. So here you have a squeeze, you're consolidating. There are earnings coming up. Kind of a run into earnings type play looks kind of interesting there. Yeah, that's a great looking chart. I'll keep an eye on that one for an ad. And then CVNA as well. Kind of the same pattern. Crowd and CVNA, like same pattern. ASML. There's a lot of these. We've had these big run up in the markets, right? And so, the stocks are kind of coming down and starting to kind of kick back up here are interesting. Oh yeah, how did Snow end up after earnings? That's a hell of a move. That's got to be more than the expected move. So that's actually so those kind of moves are great because they tend to keep going. So we'll keep an eye on that one tomorrow. That one, those kind of tend to keep going. S&Ps here really just a absolute. I mean, it's only I guess it's 11-point move down, but it feels like it's more. But just no, the internals here are continuing to kind of stay on the negative side. Nice. Yeah, those are great. I mean, this is those kind of stocks have been rewarded with continued institutional support. So you kind of consolidate, you just kind of grind higher, which are very tradable. TSM. Yeah, it looks good. This is I think the issue with a lot of stocks right now, really a flop here on the S&P is that's pretty lame. Almost for a minute there, it looked like we might get an interesting close and just a total flop. The problem with this is that you get a lot of squeezes and you're just running out of juice. And so, on the shorter term, you're kind of getting some action. But this is a lot of the market is like that right now. Yeah, SPX, there's some SPX sometimes is great to trade and other times it's a really a pain. And up 58.58. Yeah, it would take quite a move now, quite a buy program to get us into yeah, Apple's dead. Right now it's just meh. It needs to get, there's no attractive setup on it at all. If anything, just do iron condors on it. It's really just also, when we're trading stocks, when I say it's dead, it just means that from a trading perspective, it's not interesting and there's not anything really setting up on it on a shorter term basis. That doesn't mean there's not trades available on it. Oh, let's do some iron condors and let's do some things like that. But, there's certainly more interesting things to do. Yeah, we're kind of approaching we got the flush down with the tariff stuff, and we got the rip back up, and now it's kind of like, all right, are we just kind of in for some, I mean, frankly, back to normal, normal ranges, kind of a thing. All right, let's see what kind of volume and stuff we're getting here into the close. Yeah, just nothing. It's just really, it's a time factor now. I mean, if we can get anything, any type of a rip going into the close, but just kind of a blah blah blah. And bigger picture here, I mean, the markets, uh, healthy markets here would have actually ripped pretty hard today. And the fact that we're just kind of sucking eggs here kind of says a lot, about the markets as well. Let's see what we get into the close. We're still just, internals are just VIX climbing. Could have been interesting. Not so much. Thanks to all who donated. He gets new art. A little bit of a tick pop here. This would have been nice to see at 241. I don't know if there's enough time left to get anything too interesting going into the close, but let's see. I'll try the tick trick here. If you get your mouse and you circle it counterclockwise 3 times around the +1,000 tick level, the ticks kind of want to come up and see what you're doing. So sometimes that can get the markets moving. I mean, frankly, this is what I wanted to see the internals doing 9 minutes ago. So it's probably too late, but let's see if anything interesting happens. Decent earnings move here. Stocks up 58%. Advance Auto Parts, wow. They are selling some carburetors. Yeah, add it there. Tesla off here a smidge, not surprising, moving down. Oh, 15. Yeah, you want to make sure, definitely make sure position sizing and whether you're trading, you meant to trade the micros or the regulars. Nasdaq holding up pretty good today. I mean, it's still up 100 points. S&P is just kind of blah. IONQ. Look, IONQ not bad. I mean, this was a We've come up pretty good, pretty light sell off. See how it does into the close. I'm intrigued by tomorrow morning's open. That all-time high isn't that far away, and if there's a lot stuck short there, CRWV, we'll pause on this one. We had some great trades on this. Just kind of give it a minute. Looks a little tired. MOC, yeah, 1.5 billion to buy. See if that gets anything going here. We're not getting doesn't 5900 SPX 5900. We're not obviously. I mean, I say obviously, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen today. Definitely could happen tomorrow, especially going into the long weekend. But pretty blah close. I thought it looked like it might be a more interesting close today. When you get a big down day like yesterday, you kind of get in this habit of anybody that shorted the lows, just make sure you rip their faces off the next day. Pretty lackluster performance. Almost all the gamma expires tomorrow on CRWV. That makes sense. Yeah, really just not the catching sell-offs into the close is fun as well. This one, looked like it was poised to get something interesting here, but no dice. And the fact that after yesterday's 100-point down move in the S&Ps, and we're only up 13 points today, not great. Dash starting to come off. I've got a limit order to buy a pullback to the 21 EMA. We're still a long ways away from that. Yeah, no, Roger, I agree. I mean, I think this is an area where, it's time to the idea that it's like the idea that on the daily chart that we need a bigger pullback, you know, 5700 at the very least would make sense. I'll switch this to the SPX. We had this. Remember, we're just kind of back to where we were. Here's the election, right? We popped up, and we're just after all this, we're just back to where we were. The idea that this is a gap down here that probably should get filled, that certainly could happen. Um, but we're at a point here where the long side is time to kind of get a little bit more cautious for sure. And it may be something too. There's always going to be like these momentum stocks of the day and stuff like that too. And I've noticed that there are times in the market where it. Oh gosh, we're back to 58.50. That iron condor would have been great. Yeah, very much a buzzkill close on the long side. If there's any positives here, the Nasdaq actually, not a bad day. S&Ps are kind of DOA at the moment, and we do have it, and it's kind of weird. Next week, we get the long 3-day weekend. Usually we rally into that. Almanac is saying, next 2 or 3 days next week should be bullish, and then we got cycle highs kicking in. So just kind of a lot of mixed stuff here, right? Yeah, pretty ugly close here now. Look at the ticks. It's brutal. Yeah, that would have been much more fun to play on the downside. That'll teach me to have faith in this market. Yeah, very limp ending of the day. The down moves are fun into the close. It just was not. It just when we got into that 220, 240 phase, it just that wasn't the setup. And we'll see where it ends up here. Only got like 4 minutes left. Yeah, well, on the S&Ps, yeah, I think the S&Ps the last couple days have been a little eh. Momentum stocks have been pretty awesome. There's always the kind of the three, well, four types of markets where you're in, where there's accumulation, markup, distribution, markdown, and we've been in this markup from about the mid second week of April lows. It's been in a massive markup kind of a market. Now we're just kind of back into consolidation, possible distribution, and a little bit of switching gears. If we look on Trace, so obviously the possibility of getting to this upward pocket, no dice, but then we're actually going all the way. Yeah, it was a pretty solid rip. All right, let's take a look. I want to see how Tesla's closing here. Tesla 341. All right, it's come on. It's moving with the markets. See if it's got some juice for tomorrow. IonQ. IonQ. That's a. I mean, that's very respectable pullback and a hold. So we'll see what it can do tomorrow. Nasdaq kind of gave it up as well. Yeah, so we'll see. Tomorrow will be interesting. See if it's a total. Yeah, if it's you get some continuation to the downside, or if there's actually some action here. Yeah, that would have been much more fun to participate in. Something when it's unknown too, buying those when you get at about 240, also just kind of buying a straddle or strangle is also kind of interesting because then you're just looking for a move. It doesn't matter if it's up or down. Yeah. So the good news is for the webinar, it's not tonight. It's literally in this room in about 15 minutes. And so we'll probably I'll take a quick break and then just roll right into it. So we're just going to kind of update some of the cycles and things like that. It would have been, see where the indexes close here. Right. So cash is closed. So I'm just kind of seeing if after hours what the Nasdaq here does, because a lot of time if it's pressure just in the close and then you see kind of a rip after hours, that's usually good for the next day. But we'll see. It's markets are the nature of the markets here has certainly changed quite a bit from from this move, right? Target on crowd. So we've got a squeeze setting up. I think that's the all-time high there, but on something like this, 454, you take that out, 1272 extension of this is about 460. So that would be kind of the first area. Yeah, Tesla moved with the market. It's pretty lame. Friday's usually pretty solid, but I mean, yeah, I definitely would have preferred a close up closer to the snow line here. IONQ, not bad. Let's see what it can do tomorrow. Just kind of had uh, a drift off into the close. And considering on a day like this, a lot of times at the end of the day, there's like massive profit taking from day traders. You didn't get a lot of that. And Meta, no surprise, moved down with the markets. What didn't move down? AVGO moved down with the markets. Coin, we're out of coin. Good exit on coin. And yeah, so yeah, just kind of a very much a blah day, blah close. So I think the biggest challenge on something like this is that the markets, they got hammered yesterday, and in a healthy market, when you get something like that, it's kind of like, all right, that happens, and then the next day they just rip it back up. And the fact that they couldn't do it today, not a great sign in the short term. It doesn't mean we still can't have some back and forth, but we also want to kind of be aware here that the dynamics are changing a little bit. And so if we look, this big gap up, we got, we're testing this, this fire line is such a monster. And at the very least, could we at least get another retest of the fire line before, these cycle highs kind of kick in? And, today just couldn't close it. Yeah, Iron Condor ended up great at, yeah, it'd been $8. Yeah, very much a kind of nature of the market has changed on a day like this. And same thing here. If this can't hold, we get down to 57.50 very quickly. That's 100 points below. Tomorrow will be a pretty important day, just to kind of see how things kind of shape up. And usually, even if there is going to be a decent decline, the market, they always try to make it not look too obvious. Like the best thing would be strength in the next week, eke out new highs, and then take it down. That would be the classic evil bull trap. I say, evil, for the unaware, but that would be the most normal thing for the market to do. But the other thing from there is just that, this may be all she wrote in the short term, and it's time to start coming back and filling in some gaps and things like that. Tomorrow will be an important day. I mean, tomorrow is going to kind of set the tone. And then we've got, yeah, Nvidia earnings next week, and Nvidia from a daily perspective holding up. Yeah, it sold off here a little bit, but positive on the day. We're just consolidating along the fire line, so a little bit of hurry up and wait for that to unfold. No, Cedar, I've kind of, doesn't necessarily matter if the Monday's off or not. No, you can, and remember the options market, even though it's closed for the 3 days, the option market takes that into account. So, it knows that there's not as, it'll adjust the decay accordingly. Yeah, Surf Rider, that actually looks pretty good. All right, well, let's do this. I'm gonna take, let's just take a quick break here. I will put up a note. Let's see there, blank note. Quick break. Cycle date update. Webinar starts at 3:15 p.m. Central. Back in a few minutes. All right, guys, back. I'll be back here in about 5 minutes or so just to get set up and everything.